Ah, the Middle Ages, a time when life was simple and yet so complex. A time where the act of looking could stimulate desire in both the observer and the observed. When finding a private space for intimacy could be a challenge, sometimes leading to the most unusual rendezvous spots. A time when even dreams had a place in literature, with one of the earliest descriptions of a wet dream coming from a 12th century novel. Can you imagine cherries and red apples carrying romantic connotations? Or texts written with the sole purpose of improving sexual abilities? Yes, all that was part of the Middle Ages. The Catholic Church had strict rules about sex. When, how, and with whom one could have sex were all under scrutiny. There were specific days of the week when sex was prohibited, and lengthy periods of abstinence marked the calendar. There were also books setting out rules and punishments for sexual practices. But despite these restrictions, there were those who had their own preferences, their own desires. Take, for instance, the 9th century superstar singer Arib al-Mamuniyah. She had her own specific preferences in a lover. No topic was off limits in the Middle Ages. Even riddles and comic stories carried sexual references. Prostitution, though considered sinful, was tolerated and regulated. There were philosophers who extolled the benefits of sex, and even a medieval Arabic text listed numerous names for a penis. But wait until you hear the most intriguing part about sex in the Middle Ages. Oh, but for that, well, you'll have to stick around to find out. What's up, my amazing and curious folks? Are you ready to unravel the mysteries of history together? I'm Caesar, your guide through the annals of human knowledge, and with me is the brilliant Sonia, always ready to lend her insights.
Hi everyone, can't wait to delve into today's topic with you all.
Remember folks, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you don't miss any episode of the Curiosity Wonderland. Let's dive into the past, shall we? So, medieval times were a roller coaster ride when it came to attitudes towards sex. It was like a pendulum swinging from one extreme of open-mindedness to the other of prohibition or total shunning.
That's quite puzzling. Was the change in attitudes related to shifts in religious or political power at the time?
It's possible, but it's also a reminder that medieval times spanned centuries and cultures. Now here's something truly intriguing. In medieval society, the eyes and gazes played a vital role in sexual attraction. People believed that the act of looking could actively stimulate desire in both the observer and the observed.
That sounds like they had a really advanced understanding of human psychology and attraction.
Indeed. But it was also a double-edged sword, as women were often advised not to look at men directly to avoid tempting them.
So much complexity. Were there also issues about where people could be intimate?
Oh yes, privacy was a true luxury back then. Sometimes, believe it or not, the church, being safe and deserted for most of the day, became a sort of medieval make-out point.
Talk about irony. What about dreams? Did they have any significance?
Absolutely. In fact, we have one of the earliest descriptions of a wet dream from a 12th century novel called Hismine and Hysminius. The character Hysminius describes in quite vivid detail the physical and emotional sensations of a wet dream.
And they say history is boring. What about symbols? Did medieval people use symbols to express their feelings?
They surely did. By the end of the Middle Ages, fruits like cherries and red apples given by a man became symbols of love. The fig, with its purple exterior, was believed to symbolize female genitals.
Wow, that's a lot to digest. It just shows that every era has its own unique way of expressing and experiencing sexuality.
Continuing our journey, we find that the Middle Ages were not void of guides to improve sexual experiences, sort of like a medieval version of a self-help book. Can you believe that?
Really? What kind of advice were they giving?
It's fascinating. The advice was predominantly aimed at men. For example, in the 10th century Encyclopedia of Pleasure, it was advised that women favor a man who is knowledgeable and harmonious with them. It even suggested that a man should aim for his orgasm to coincide with hers during their first meeting to cement their love.
Now that's surprisingly progressive, but I am sensing some conflict here. Wasn't the church really strict about sexual practices?
You're right. The Catholic Church had stringent rules about when and how one could have sex. Days like Sundays, Thursdays, and Fridays were no sex days, and there were also lengthy periods of abstinence, like during Lent and before Christmas.
Sounds very restrictive. Were there any penalties for breaking these rules?
Yes, there were. Penitentials were books that set out rules and the assigned penance for breaking them. Some of these books even banned oral and anal sex and masturbation. For example, the Penitentiale Theodori mandated that a man who masturbates must abstain from meat for 4 days.
Wow. The Middle Ages were indeed a time of contrast when it comes to sexuality. It's like a tug of war between the human instincts and religious norms.
Exactly. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We are yet to explore more. Now here's an intriguing bit. It seems that even the sexual positions were regulated. The missionary position was the only one permitted, as it was thought to provide the least pleasure to the couple.
That's quite restrictive. It's funny you mention this. Just the other day, I was talking to a friend who's studying psychology, and we were discussing how societal norms and regulations can impact personal relationships and practices, including sexuality.
That's an interesting point, and it ties in well with our discussion. It reminds me of this book I was reading recently, which talked about how the societal norms of different periods influenced people's personal lives, including their sexual behaviors.
That must be fascinating. It's just astonishing how much our behaviors and practices are influenced by societal norms. Coincidentally, I was reading a book on the similar lines where a rabbi in the late 13th century advised circumcised men to keep their wives away from uncircumcised men, citing their longer thrust time as a potential lure.
Oh yes, it's amazing how societal norms, religious beliefs, and personal preferences intermingle. For example, the 9th century singer Arib al-Mamuniya, when asked what she looked for in a lover, replied, "A penis of steel and nice body odor." Now that's a clear deviation from the religious norms of her time.
Absolutely. This just goes to show how personal preferences and societal norms can sometimes be in direct conflict with each other. Quite thought-provoking, isn't it?
Let's dive a bit deeper into the Middle Ages, where we find medieval riddles with suggestive double entendre meanings. Consider this one. A curiosity hangs by the thigh of a man, under its master's cloak. It is pierced through in the front, it is stiff and hard, and it has a good standing place. The answer to this riddle is surprisingly a key.
Oh wow, that riddle is certainly more than meets the eye.
Indeed. Also, there were tales known as fabliaux between the 12th and 14th centuries, which were quite popular in France. These tales were comic stories that often included sexual escapades between men and women, with very suggestive titles.
It seems the Middle Ages had their own version of adult comedy.
Absolutely. Also worth noting is the fact that while prostitution was viewed as a sinful act, it was also tolerated in many urban areas throughout medieval Europe as a necessary evil.
That's quite paradoxical.
And here's something I found fascinating. In the early 15th century, an author from the medieval Arabic world provided a list of the many names a penis could be called in their work, The Perfumed Garden of Sensual Delight.
That's certainly an explicit indication of how open certain societies were about sex and sexuality.
Definitely. The Middle Ages seem to have been a period of contrasting views on sexuality. On one hand, there were stringent religious restrictions, and on the other, there were surprisingly open discussions and portrayals of sexual themes. Isn't it fascinating how society evolves and how different periods approach the same topic so differently?
Absolutely, it truly is fascinating.
And to our audience, isn't it interesting to see how societal norms and values change over time? What are your thoughts on this? Are you as intrigued by these discoveries as we are? Stay tuned for more as we continue to explore the world of curiosities. As we delve deeper into our topic, we come across Nasir al-Din Tusi, one of the most renowned philosopher-scientists of the medieval Middle East. He also penned a book about sexuality, where he championed the benefits of sex and dismissed any notion of it being harmful. He even went as far as to say, "There is no greater human pleasure than that of sexual intercourse." He further describes various aphrodisiacs that could enhance sexual satisfaction.
It's interesting to see such a positive and open discussion about sexuality in a time that we often think of as being quite repressed.
Indeed, And for anyone who'd like to expand their knowledge on the subject, there are several books that delve into the intricacies of sexuality during the Middle Ages. Sexuality in Medieval Europe, Doing Unto Others by Ruth Mazo-Karas, The Very Secret Sex Lives of Medieval Women, An Inside Look at Women and Sex in Medieval Times by Rosalie Gilbert, and The Fires of Lust, Sex in the Middle Ages by Catherine Harvey come highly recommended.
I'll definitely add those to my reading list.
There's also Erotica, Love and Humor in Arabia, Spicy Stories in the Book of Songs by Al-Isfahani, translated by George Dimitri Sawa, for anyone interested in exploring sexual perspectives from different cultures during the Middle Ages.
That sounds intriguing as well. It's fascinating how these historical texts can provide such a rich insight into the sexual culture of the Middle Ages.
Absolutely. It's a testament to the complexity of human nature and how our attitudes towards sex and sexuality have evolved over time. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We still have more to explore in our journey through the world of curiosities. Stay tuned, folks. What a journey we've been on, exploring the complexities and nuances of sexuality in the Middle Ages. From the importance of a gaze to the concept of wet dreams, we've dived deep into a world far removed from us in time, but close to us in being human. We've seen how love was symbolized through fruits, how sex was regulated by the church, and even how a superstar singer from the 9th century preferred her men. The Middle Ages, it appears, were not as medieval as we might think. And to wrap it all up, remember the riddle from the Exeter book? That cheeky curiosity hanging by the thigh of a man? Well, it was just a key. And isn't that fitting? Because today we've unlocked a treasure chest of knowledge on a topic that is timeless, intriguing, and yes, occasionally cheeky.
What a way to put it. This entire journey has been one fascinating revelation after another. Thank you for joining us on this ride through the Middle Ages. If you enjoyed this episode as much as we did, please blast that like button, leave a comment, and share the episode with your friends.
Yes, indeed. We cannot wait to explore more curiosities with you on the next episode. Until then, stay curious.
Absolutely. Stay curious, stay inspired, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Goodbye, folks.
This exploration into sex in the Middle Ages was sparked by an article I found on the medievalists.net site, published on February 11th, 2024, by the team at medievalists.net. If you're keen to dive further into the subject, you'll find the full URL in the description. Until next time, stay curious.